Hello students, Assalamualaikum, and wherever you are, good morning, good afternoon, or good evening. All right, so today is going to be our 7th class, okay, in Energy Systems and Environment. And we are going to talk about energy sustainability today. Okay. So I know that the term sustainability has been used so many times. I'm sure that you've heard a lot about sustainability. Okay, and I want you guys to think about that, think about what you already know about energy systems, and then apply that to what are the apparent links towards sustainability. Okay. So today, the learning outcomes is as such. Okay, so we are going to discuss the sustainability of our current energy systems. Okay. And then we will assess the impacts of energy generation towards social, economy, and the environment. Okay. But one word of caution is starting from today's class, right? We are not only going to we're not only going to be focusing on the theories anymore. Okay, so we are going more towards discussion, okay, towards some ideas that you guys can think about, right? So this is also in anticipation of our next live classes, hopefully, all right? So I hope you guys can participate, okay? Maybe not for today, all right? So because today is sort of an intermediate between that, okay? Of course, I'm going to see you after semester break, right? And then we are going to focus more on, two-way interactions rather basically just focusing on only the lecture notes, right? So sustainability, it is a very general word, I can say, okay? So if you search sustainability, there's a lot of different definitions for it, okay? One simple definition, this is from Webster Dictionary. Sustainability is said as relating to or being a method of harvesting or using a resource so that the resource is not depleted or permanently damaged. Okay, so it's quite clear there, right? A method of harvesting or using a resource. Okay, but then again, it's not only about methods, right? It's not only about harvesting or using a resource. There are other factors included as well. Okay, so basically, in 1713, okay, this is one of the very first definition which relates to sustainability, and this was mentioned by Hans Karl von Karlowitz. Okay, and he says, making use of natural, renewable resources that people can continue to rely on their yields in the long term. Okay, so he was the chief mining official of the Principality of Saxony, all right? And this remark was upon, the forest industry, okay? So they were saying the forestry resources, okay, as long as we keep on using these resources, okay, there will be a time when it's no longer there, right? And you have to think about what's happening, what is going to happen to the people of the next generation. So we cannot only think about ourselves now, right? We have to start thinking about others, right? So this idea was expressed very early on, 1713, but it's not until later, okay, that people start to really take sustainability seriously. Okay, for example, in 1987, okay, this was a report, the Brundtland Commission report to the UN. Okay, and report is titled Our Common Future. Now they start saying sustainable development is development that meets the needs of the present without compromising the ability of future generations to meet their own needs. So now it becomes more apparent. Okay, so we have to develop, that's true. Okay, anywhere we are, whoever we are, we have to develop ourselves. Okay, in terms of countries, the country development is very closely linked to its economy. Okay, and economy has to grow because our population is growing, right? Now, that is a given. So development is a must. But then you have to consider the needs of the future generations as well, right? So this forms the very basic idea of when, from the UN, they started talking about SDGs, Sustainable Development Goals. And we will look into that further along the presentation, right? But in conclusion, okay, for this sustainability, the definition. So I hope that you guys are aware, okay, why sustainability comes into effect, right? So of course we are, this course is on energy systems, but sustainability, it falls into all of our lives, okay, all aspects of our lives, not only energy, but everything. Okay, so it's sort of the way of thinking that we have to start to inculcate in ourselves and also in others, okay, because this is for the future of our planet. Okay. Now, if you search sustainability, okay, there's going to be a lot of keywords coming up, right? And if you look here, this is only one of the many that I've generated in Google. If you Google sustainability and look at the image, you're going to find this among thousands. Okay. And if you look here, okay, you can see what are the related keywords with sustainability. And one of the biggest one there is, of course, Earth, okay, energy, right? Energy ecology. Okay. So if you think about that, energy is very, very intimately linked with sustainability, right? And of course, if we're talking about energy, there's a lot of different aspects in there. Here we have how it's being produced, how people are using it, the demand, what are the technologies currently being used, okay, to produce energy, what are the types of renewable and non-renewable energy, are those sustainable or not? So many questions you can throw out there, right? So at this point, you have to ask yourself, okay, and you have to really think about energy, okay, based on what we have learned so far, right? How do we how do we envision sustainability practices in the energy sector, right? And it's very, very important, because one of the things, if you look at, this is our in data, and you can Google this. This is open access data, basically, right? Now, if you look at global greenhouse gas emission by sector, right? You look here, energy is like 73.2%. That's like almost almost three quarters of the total global greenhouse gas emission. Okay? And we know, of course, with greenhouse gas emission, it relates very much towards air pollution, of course. And secondly, the most important thing is climate change, right? So we link that back to sustainability. We know that climate change is happening, and the rate that it is happening is very, very unprecedented. Okay, we have people who don't believe in climate change, okay, and they were saying, oh, come on, the increase in temperature is natural. It's a natural process if you look at millions of years ago, the world is an ice world, okay, and gradually it heats up. Yes, true, but the rate that is happening was taking like millions of years. But what we see now is much, much worse. And our current population, our environment are not, will not be able to cope with such drastic changes. Okay? So if we think about that, there is that need. Okay? If you think about the future generation, what kind of world are we preparing for our, for the next generation, for our kids, for your kids, okay, and their grandchildren, right? So coming back into this figure, right? Energy, 73.2%. So you can imagine why energy is something that, is very, very relevant if we're talking about sustainability. Okay. And of course, in energy, there are many different factors, of course. Yeah, we have our energy use, our energy demand. It's not only comes from, the use of electricity, but also from transportation, okay, and also in the manufacturing processes, okay. So these are the situation that we have right now, okay, and the implication of that is what's happening to our Earth, right? The environmental cost that it poses to the Earth, okay. Is it something that we can pay for? That remains to be seen. Okay. So if we look at emissions by gas, right? We have carbon dioxide, of course, 74%. Okay, but we do have others as well. We have methane, nitrous oxide, and also the F gases. Okay. But of course, methane is a much, much worse greenhouse gas compared to carbon dioxide. Okay, and it's fortunate that it's not as high as CO2, right? But of course, the emission, okay, the concentration, or rather the pattern, the composition of GHG gases in the atmosphere, it comes from basically what are because the energy is one of the largest sector, okay, that leads to GHG emission. Okay. And we have different types of resources, as we've learned in the previous few lectures. Okay. And, based on each of these resources, there are different types of emissions that are being emitted. Okay. Of course, the largest portion of that is CO2. Okay. And we can, that is why basically people are representing this GHG emission through CO2, okay, because that is the highest concentration in the atmosphere right now, okay, based on the GHG, okay, not the current atmosphere, because nitrogen is supposedly the highest one, yeah, okay. So of course, the CO2 emission, why is stagnant up until this point? Okay, because remember back, if we think about history, what's happening here was the Industrial Revolution, okay, where people start to discover the use of coal, right, in steam engines to power large engines, okay, and this prompted the use of fossil fuels. And of course, it starts with coal and then it comes with petroleum, okay, all the gases, and also the biogas, all right? So when that starts to happen, you see what's happening in the annual CO2 emission. Okay, started increasing exponentially. Okay, and if we think back, okay, about the economy also flourished. Okay, it expanded very, very rapidly with the advance of energy systems. Okay, because we start in trying to move our economy. Okay, the many economic activities require a lot of energy. Okay, and once you give a very sort of unlimited supply of energy, okay, that prompts the expansion of the economy. All right. So if you look at who has contributed most to global CO2 emission, okay, and this is a very good representation of global CO2 emission. And of course, if you can find Malaysia, Malaysia is here. Okay, so that is just around 0.33% of the total. But if you look at why USA, EU, okay, and China, for example, why there's such large CO2 emissions, okay, and linking that to what I've mentioned before with the economy, okay, you can imagine, okay, this where the economy expanded very rapidly, they eventually use a lot of energy. And by view of that, they will also produce more CO2 than other countries. Okay. Now, energy in society. Of course, Ban Ki-moon. Ban Ki-moon is the former UN Secretary General. Okay. And he said energy is the golden thread that weaves together economic growth, human development, and environmental society. Okay. And that makes sense. That's what we have been discussing before. Okay. So if we want to have progress in all aspects of society, and that includes social, the economy, the political, and scientific and cultural progress, they are all enabled by advances in our ability to harness energy. Okay, remember back, I think it was our second class, okay, when we look at the history of energy. If you compare the life expectancy of the people now with people maybe 500 years ago, okay, it's so different. Okay, you have the death rates of babies is so much higher. You have women who died after giving birth, okay, and that is so high back then because they do not have access to healthcare systems, right? And then of course, gender equality is also something that is increasingly scrutinized now, right? But it does lead to the energy security that we currently have in our world right now. Okay. So I'm just going to say this again, right? We have to think about the future. What are we preparing for the future? Okay, and that is basically the very reason why the UN had developed the Sustainable Development Goals. So sorry about here, there is a typo there. So Sustainable Development Goals, SDG. Okay? And I'm sure you've heard all about that, even from your reading, okay, even from your, if you attended any seminars talking about sustainability, people are now always talking about SDGs because basically it's something that encompasses everything that countries have to strive upon, okay, to make sure that we are able to keep the earth, okay, as a hospitable place to live in, and not only for us but for the future generation. So as part of the SDG, okay, a lot of countries has adopted the goal of achieving 100% access to clean, affordable, and reliable energy by 2030. Okay, so we can see the importance of energy. Okay, and I'm sure that you all are already aware, okay, why this is so. Okay, and again, here is another representation of the link between energy and development, right? So if you look in this figure, right? So the dot here is energy use per capita, right? And it's separated into different blocks, right? Because this is actually, the lower axis here, it refers to the developed status. Okay, so here is the developed countries, okay, and whereas here is developing ones, right? So if you see there, you can already see the energy use per capita is the highest when the country is a developed country as compared to here, okay, where this is developing countries, okay, the energy use per capita is very, very low. And also comparing the energy mix, right? We have energy mix from either electricity or biomass base. Okay, for developing countries, right? You can see that this green one is biomass, and this biomass is not related to biofuels, right? This is actually biomass, which is used for heating and for cooking, right? So they technically, the population has to go out and find firewoods, right? Basically woods to assist in so that they can combust that, or they can fire that up to provide heat, okay, provide light, basically providing energy for their daily use, right? And comparing that, the electricity is so much lower, okay, compared to the other countries at higher levels of development status. Okay, so this is another thing that we have to think about, right? And also SDG is also trying to address this, okay, because we want energy to be accessible to everyone, doesn't matter where they are, okay, where they come from. And also they need to have access to very clean types of energy, okay, because for example, in the African countries where they use biomass for cooking, usually what they do is they will fire that up inside or rather close to their house. Okay? And the fumes that are released from that activity, okay, is it's not good for their health. Okay, so it becomes something that is linked back to health reasons. Okay, not only for energy, but they have to think about health as well, right? Of course, comparing that to electricity will not, give individuals very bad effects, okay? Because electricity is, we can say it's a secondary energy, okay, and it's very, very clean in that way. It's only the generation of it that is in contest, right? So depending on how it is being produced, that makes it either sustainable or not. Okay, but electricity itself is very clean, okay, and it's a very good form of energy because it can be transferred into different types of energy that you need. Okay, so if you need Mechanical energy, you can use that. You can transform that from electricity to mechanical energy, right? So, of course, sustainability is it is an idea. Okay? It is something that people have to think about and have to adopt into their life, right? And that is talking about individuals. But of course, if we look from top to bottom, okay, from the perspective of the world into perspective of the country, okay, basically no form of energy is possible without changing the environment. Okay, it's not possible because we have to think about the demand of energy. Okay, the level of energy required, it requires land. You have to have resources for it. Okay, you have to have investments, and all of these processes will produce waste at one form or another, and one point or another. Okay, so even if you think about power plants, okay, definitely you have to have land. You have to have very big land to construct the plant. Okay, you have to have the resources. You have to have, if it's a coal-fired plant, so you have to have the coal, right? And how are you going to get that? You have to have capital. You must have money, right? And that's where the investment comes in. So you have to build up the infrastructure, okay, not only for the production, but also for transmission and distribution, right? And you have to think about the waste as well. Okay, so none of the energy resources that we have, if we want to change that into usable energy, it all requires changing the environment in one form or another. Okay, be it solar, be it wind, even renewable resources, non-renewable resources, if it's nuclear power, okay, all of those require some changes. And that is only on the environment. How about the economy? So our economy requires affordable, abundant, and reliable energy. Because remember, all of these processes, okay, for us to manufacture something, right, to treat something, they all requires energy, okay? And it's only by having all these processes that we can propel the economy, right? So that is the link between economy, and sustainability. And then, of course, social, you have to have basic social standards, okay, to attain universal human rights. Okay? And these basic necessities, they require basic access to affordable, clean energy, right? So you have to have access, basically, before you can improve the lifestyle, for example. If you want to compare our life here in Malaysia with some other countries who are maybe less fortunate, okay, they are in the developing countries, the early stages of developing countries, okay, it may be different, right? And one of the primary reasons for that is the access to energy. So you can see that, all three factors, the social, environment, and the economy, is very, very closely linked. Okay, you cannot just simply pick and choose, okay, which one you want to make sustainable. It has to be all. Okay, these three pillars are inseparable. Yeah, it's very closely linked, but they are sometimes clashing and sometimes complementary. And that's true, right? Remember about economy, we want to push our economy, but what are the costs to the environment? Okay, so at the same time, you want to increase the social economy, for example. Okay, but how much money, okay, can you invest into that? right? And basically, this tree is the pillars of sustainability. So it's the social, environmental, and economic. These are the three pillars of sustainability, right? And if you think about the relationship between all three, okay, having you know, a way to make all three complementary to each other is what makes something sustainable, right? And this is talking about very general, can be applied to any types of processes or any types of sectors, any types of products. You can apply this to a lot of different things. But if we think about energy, okay, of course, we have to think about the resources, the production, and the lifestyle, right? So resources is what we have, production is what we make from it, okay? And lifestyle is how we use it, right? So that is about sustainable, the idea of sustainable, okay? So in a situation where energy becomes unsustainable is when you have a relative imbalance between one or two of these three pillars. Okay, so you can have the economy and social development, but at the expense of the environment. Okay, and this is unsustainable, right? And it's something that needs to be addressed. It's a very valid concern for energy. Okay. In our current scenario, not only in Malaysia, but for the whole world, okay, people are moving towards sustainable types of energy because we are thinking about, trying to take responsibility to what has already been done, okay, and we are trying to make sure that we can keep this world at its best, okay, for our next future, right? So going back to UN Sustainable Development Goals, okay, they are 17 goals that basically is highlighted that can transform our world. Okay, so this is the tagline, 17 goals to transform our world. Okay, and sustainable development is actually a socio-ecological process, and it's characterized by the fulfillment of human needs while maintaining the quality of the natural environment. Okay, because we have our own needs, we have our demands, right? But how you want to maintain the quality of our nature, okay, while fulfilling those demands, fulfilling those needs, right? And again, this is highlighted again. So our current economic system, it depends on exponential growth, okay? Because, every year people in the papers, okay, the GDP is reported, okay? Not only every year, but it's quarterly, right? So you can imagine if, of course, this is the link to the economy, and we are going to talk more about this in our, not this next topic, but a few others after this. Okay, but we are going to look a little bit on the links between economy and energy, right? But basically what I'm trying to say is, countries all over the world, they are striving to improve their economy, right? And the way to do that is you want to make sure that the economic growth is in the exponential stage. Okay, so it's increasing very, very rapidly. But at the same time, we have finite resources. Okay, it's not this is the very definition of unsustainability. Okay, because you have very finite resources and you want to grow exponentially. Okay, it might be possible within a specific time frame, but afterwards, when the resources are finished, what's going to happen? All right. So SDG is the UN's answer to that. Okay, so if we look at number 7, goal number 7 is affordable and clean energy. Okay, and the longer one is ensure access to affordable, reliable, sustainable, and modern energy for all. Right? So a few keywords there. Okay, access, right? And access is for all. So not only to specific countries, but to all countries out there. And we want to ensure that the energy, the type of energy is very affordable, it's reliable, sustainable. Right? And number 13 is also quite related if we're talking about energy in specific. Okay. So again, typo here, take urgent action to combat climate change and its impacts. Okay, of course, it's related to energy because we know that the environmental impact of energy is very, very relevant if we're talking about climate change. Right. So this is a few of the listed. Okay, if we think about the role of energy, okay, and how the SDG is linked to that, right? So if we have energy, for example, we can solve, I mean, it has importance in terms of poverty. Okay, so if we have a very good energy security, okay, the energy supply is secure, the families can save time and money due to reduced fuel demand for cooking and lighting, right? And then, of course, access to energy enables economic development. Okay, you know, in some places where there's no access to electricity, entrepreneurial activities cannot go beyond daylight hours, right? Because there's no light. How are you going to trade, for example? Okay. So in terms of hunger, okay, staple foods need to be cooked before they are eaten, right? And this is linked not only to hunger but to health as well. You cannot eat uncooked meals, okay, because it will give you a very bad impact. And of course, agricultural activities require energy for irrigation, processing, refrigeration. Okay? If you have a sector, agricultural sector, but no access to energy, okay, you're not going to be able to produce food crops at a rate where you can supply to many people. At most, maybe you can do a very small scale one, right? And your scope will only be limited to, you know, maybe if it's in villages, okay, only in that area. But you cannot, if you think about this in terms of larger scale, in terms of countries, yeah, you need to have a very stable agricultural activities in order to feed your country, right? So you cannot, we have to think about countries providing enough food, okay? Because we don't want to have a situation where you have to import food from other countries. And that is already happening right now. Okay, even us, we are rice producer, but we do import rice as well from our neighbors. Okay, why? Because we do not have enough capacity to satisfy the demands, right? Now, apart from that, also we have health, we have education, we have gender equality, and so much more. So these are some of the things that I've listed. Okay, and cuts across, you know, different types of sectors, basically. Okay? Because if you think about one, okay, it doesn't really only fall under that sector. Okay, it cuts across so many different things, which is why if we're talking about sustainability, again, it's something that is not black and white, right? There's so much link between one another, right? So what I want to highlight is that sustainable energy is the key to sustainable development, right? Because again, we're thinking in terms of economy, okay, in terms of the social, in terms of the environment, okay, and all of these three, can achieve the level of sustainable, okay, if the energy is sustainable, right? I hope that is clear by now. So if you look at the sustainability, there's always this different talk about, whether things are renewable, is it sustainable, is it low carbon, okay? And this is specifically about energy, okay? So sustainability is actually, it's less black and white compared to renewable, because if you talk about renewable, okay, it's so much easier. So, we already covered renewable versus non-renewable resources, okay? And it's very clear cut. If the resource is something that is recurring, okay, and you can continuously produce it, it becomes something that is renewable. Otherwise, if it's finite, if it's going to finish up at one point in time, that becomes non-renewable. So it's easy to categorize that. But how are you going to categorize sustainable energy? Okay, because renewable does not always mean sustainable, right? Have to really think hard about that. Why? Yeah. Why is this very, very significant? Okay. So for example, this is a example which I hope people can relate to. Okay. So if you want to compare between sustainable and renewable, so if you have a yearly salary of 1 million ringgit, okay, every year, that is sustainable because you that is enough basically for fulfilling your needs and your demands basically. Okay, and it is renewable because you receive that every year, right? But then, if you have a monthly salary of 100 every month, it's still renewable because you still receive that every month. But is it sustainable? Can you live with that amount of money? Yeah. And then comparing that to, you win, you take part in a contest, okay, and you receive the grand prize. You receive 1 million ringgit, okay, as the first prize winner. Okay, that is sustainable because basically you have that money and you can either invest it. You're not going to, I hope you're not going to spend all 1 million ringgit on something. Okay, definitely you're going to think about how to make it sustainable, right? But it's non-renewable because you only receive it one time. Okay, and comparing that to if you are on PTPTN right now. Okay, and for example, I'm just giving this number. Okay, so don't feel bad or don't feel good if it's more or less than this, because it's just a random number. So receiving PTPN for 20,000 ringgit for 4 years of study. So it's not sustainable because basically you only have basically 20,000 for 4 years. So beyond that, it's questionable. Okay? And then it's not renewable because it's only one-off for 4 years. Okay. But that highlights what is the difference between sustainable and renewable. Okay, so things can be renewable but non-sustainable. Okay, and it can be the other way around as well. So you have to really think about what are the type of energy systems that are sustainable. Okay, we really need to think about more on sustainability rather than renewability. Okay, so if we have an example about energy, about wind power. Okay, wind power generates renewable electricity, but you can undergo blackouts due to intermittency because there are times when there's no wind at all, so you won't be able to generate any electricity. Okay. And then with biomass briquettes, okay, you can get renewable cooking fuel, but it's not sustainable because it causes air pollution and health problems, right? And then you have renewable electricity from solar PV. Okay? But if you think about it, the resources needed to build the PV panels, okay, you require rare minerals, okay, and how are you going to dispose that after its lifetime? Okay, it causes environmental damage, right? So these are the kinds of questions that we need to ask ourselves when we look at the many different ways of producing energy. Okay, so it can be solar, wind, hydro, biomass, okay, especially in terms of biomass, because there's a lot of different technologies that are related to biomass energy. Okay, really depends on how sustainable that specific process is. Okay, so if you look at the systems approach towards reducing emissions, so this is an example. Okay, so you have your primary energy resources, okay, and that is basically it can be fossil fuels or it can be renewable resources. It can be wind, solar, right? And you transform that into usable energy. Okay, so in this situation, we look at, for example, electricity, okay, or your diesel, okay. And then when you have that, especially in terms of electricity, you have the energy services, okay, where that energy can be transferred to the customers. All right. So how do we reduce emission? Okay, because in terms of sustainability, we really want to have a system where it's environmentally sound. Okay. So for example, in primary energy resources, you can switch to low carbon primary energy resources. Okay. Because if you compare, for example, fossil fuels, fossil fuels, you compare coal and natural gas. Okay. So coal is definitely going to produce more carbon emission compared to natural gas. Okay, and that's how you can think about selecting which are better in terms of energy, in terms of carbon emission. Okay, but don't forget, you need to have a basis. The energy basis must be similar as well, right? Before you can make a good comparison. So when you have usable energy, then you can switch to low carbon final energy. Okay? Because there are at various stages where we can do something. There are places where the technological advances can give you an advantage in terms of alternative. Okay? Whereas in energy services, we can actually reduce energy demand. Okay? And this may be linked to higher efficiency of energy. Okay, and even now people are talking about reducing your energy consumption, okay, saving your energy. How are you going to do that? Okay, there are many ways to do it, right? And then, of course, across all three, you can look at reducing the loss, the energy loss. And that is by improving the efficiency of very specific stages or equipments, for example. Okay, and why is this important? Why are we looking at systems approach? Okay, of course, the title of our course is energy systems. Okay, but that's not the answer. It's because we are if we want to make a change. Okay, of course, I'm saying that every little action counts. Okay, what you do individually does make a difference, right? But if we're really talking about energy, okay, and how it shapes the world, okay, the country, so we have to think about energy systems as a whole rather than just one household, right? So you have to think about the approach to improve the energy system of a country, for example. Okay, and then after that, energy systems of the world, okay, going from bottom up, rather than the other way around. All right. So, in terms of energy as well, okay, when we think about the three pillars of sustainability, okay, there are many ways to we can think about. There are many ideas that are linked to very specific factors. Okay, so for example, if you're talking about the environment, of course, the first thing is the emission, right? And also will have to do with pollution. Can be air pollution, it can be water pollution, okay, land pollution, right? And there are approaches towards green energy, okay, because you want to have very environmentally friendly types of technology. Okay, and then we have social. Okay, social can be gender equality, can be social inclusion, okay, where you want to include everyone, right? So if we link back to SDG, right, ensuring that everyone has access to clean, cheap energy. Okay, so you have to include everyone, no one left behind. That's the expression usually used. Okay, and then you have the perception towards energy. Okay, and the third one is economy. Okay, how the economic growth is something that is linked with energy. Okay, we've been talking about this since the very beginning, right? The job creation, if you have a very simple example is if you have a new power plant, okay, or a new technology, a new facility that produces energy, that creates job, okay, and that moves the economy. And of course, cost reduction, income generation, right? But actually, this list is not only limited to this. There's so many others, right? And you have to think about the technology as well, right? Because different types of technology with different types of resources will have different environmental, social, and economic impacts. Okay? So I think maybe you have find something with relation to socio-economic assessment, techno-economic assessment, life cycle assessment. Okay, those are some of the assessment that people are currently looking at. when talking about sustainability of a specific product or specific processes. Okay? And these are very, very relevant. Maybe it wasn't so, maybe 10 years ago or 20 years ago, but now it's become more and more important, because it has its own implication. Through using these types of assessment, we will be able to pinpoint what are the hotspots, what are the key factors in that specific technology, right, that makes it sustainable. Okay, so imagine if you have, if you are someone who is working in the solar energy, okay, and you have 5 different technologies. So which one are you going to proceed with? Okay, and sustainability, looking at it with the 3 big pillars of sustainability is one way to do that. And to make it more structured, okay, you can go through these types of assessments. Yeah. So I'm just listing this here, but we're not going to cover this in our lecture, right? If you want to find out more, then you are welcome to research about it, okay? But it's very, very interesting. Okay? It's something that is very relevant, what is happening, what is the situation nowadays, right? And you have to think back about, what types of energy that is that you are trying to look at, okay, and what are the specific technologies. Okay, so basically, we have the 3 pillars of sustainability, right? But the 4th thing is the technology. Technology is also something that is very, very important, right? Because it basically forms the basis for all the other 3. Okay, because you only you look at one type of technology and then you look at the sustainability of that, right? So it's going to be a lot of diverse technologies and applications, and you have to look at that very specific ones to get into their effects towards the environment. Okay, what are the financial affairs related to that, and also what are the social behavior of people. After all, if you want to quantify sustainability, okay, this is one way that people have suggested in quantifying sustainability. How are you going to put numbers in sustainability? Because remember, it's not really black and white. It's very, very hard to quantify. Okay, so one of that is using this equation called IPAT. I is the environmental impact, and we have P, population, A, affluence, and T, technology. Next. And if you want to make it more quantifiable, because sometimes this is quite general, okay, you can rewrite that into environmental impact equals to population, which is the number of people, and then affluence is rewritten into number of products per person. Okay, and lastly, the technology can be rewritten into environmental impact per product. Okay, and why is this significant? Because, in our current situation, okay, the number of people is not something that you can control. Okay? The world population is going to keep on increasing, and as it increases, the number of products required per person will also increase. So in this situation, the first 2, okay, the red ones highlighted here, is something that is already out of our control if we are talking about energy systems. But basically, not only that, also covers different types of approach as well. But what I'm saying is that if we're looking at energy, okay, so the number of people and the demand for energy is going to keep on increasing. Okay? So what we can do actually is to control the environmental impact of the product. Okay, and if we say product is energy, okay, so we have the responsibility to reduce this in order to make the impact, the sustainability within controllable factors. Okay, so which is why one of the ways where people are looking at technology, of course, is by studying the different ways of producing energy. Okay, and we talk about green energy as well, because that is envisioned as an alternative towards energy resources which can be damaging. Okay, so green energy are said to be environmentally friendly. Okay, so of course that is one way to do it, right? Another is energy transition. Okay, so for example, this is data from 2018, yeah, but it's still quite relevant. So we can look at how the world is changing, is transitioning from the fossil fuels towards the renewable type energy, which essentially, in terms of the environmental factors, make it more sustainable. Okay? So you can study this on your time. Okay? You can pause this and you can look further into that. But basically, if you look at the socio-economic footprint, the GDP is increasing, even if you are transitioning from fossil fuels to renewable types of energy. Okay? The GDP does increase. So this is a global result. Right? And job creation is also increasing. Right? In welfare, of course, it's enable us to provide energy access to more people, okay, in more developing countries. Right? So even in Malaysia, okay, so we are at number 39 here, right, with energy transition index, which is not quite bad. But basically, Singapore leads Asian countries in energy transition index. This is fairly recent, okay, and sorry. So Singapore is at number 21, right? So how do we generate an ecosystem where energy transition is possible? Okay. First, of course, this is very similar to the 3 pillars of sustainability. So they have called energy triangle. Okay, has to be environmentally sustainable. Yeah, and then economic development and growth, and lastly, security and access. So these are very relevant when we are talking about energy. But the enabling dimensions include capital and investment, regulation and political commitment, very important here, institutions and governance, infrastructure and innovative business environment, human capital and consumer participation, and lastly, energy system structure. Okay, so these are what has to be there, what has to be in place before energy transition can happen in any country. Okay, so basically, in conclusion, right, to answer back our learning outcomes, yeah. So I hope you guys are able to understand why sustainability is very important. Okay, and what is sustainability? It has 3 basic factors. Okay, so you have to think about energy in terms of its environment, okay, the social impact, and also the economic impact. Okay, so all three of these hand in hand makes an energy system sustainable. Okay, and we have to pursue sustainability because that is our promise for the future. Okay, we have to make our earth, you know, as sustainable as we can, you know, with the time that we have. Okay? And for us Muslims out there, you know, you are the Khalifa of the earth. Okay, so you have that responsibility, right? So I hope that this lecture, you know, you can learn something from this lecture. Okay? And I want you guys to start thinking, start linking about what we have already learned in the theories, okay, and what are the current situation out there in our country and also the world, okay. And I'll see you soon. Thank you. Bye-bye.